brother?
We finally get to learn about Jack's little brother Nicky and their time in Vietnam. So let's break down Season 3, Episode 4 of This Is Us and find out just what happened. Rise and shine on, you lovely people. Lisa here, and we finally begin to set sail on one of This Is Us's biggest mysteries, or rather maybe two of them. Who was Jack's little brother Nicky, and what happened during Jack's time in Vietnam? I honestly was very excited for this episode, not only because I love Milo Ventimiglia, not because you get to see Milo in his tighty-whities, but because we get the addition of Michael Angarano as Jack's little brother Nicky. Now, I've actually been a fan of Michael since I feel like forever, because I remember when I was young seeing him in a Hallmark commercial and thinking that he was like the cutest little kid ever. And then of course with stuff like Music of the Heart, Almost Famous, Sky High, Lords of Dogtown, so many other movies, I've always been a fan of him, so I was very excited to see him show up on one of my favorite shows, and also to take on this such a mysterious character who definitely seems like he's got a lot of meat to him. So in this episode, we hear Nicky ask at one point if it would make more sense to look at things in reverse and start at the end and move backwards to figure out how you got to where you were. And well, that's exactly what we do in this episode. We begin with Jack finding Nicky in Vietnam, and then the episode unfolds in reverse as we go back to Nicky's birth, and then we end with the rest of the scene that we begin the episode with, Jack and Nicky reuniting in Vietnam. And basically, we get to see just how broken of a man Nicky becomes, and thus begins the mystery of his death. Did Nicky die in battle? Did he commit suicide? Did something else happen? We are supposed to learn the answer to these mysteries by season's end at longest, so let's go ahead and break down this episode. First, I am gonna break down the episode in the order that we kind of saw things happen, basically go back. We kick it off with Jack arriving at landing zone Gloria in Vietnam and saying hi to his brother. Now, we don't see anything but Nicky shirtless turn and throw a cigarette into a barrel, causing obviously a fire after hearing his brother's voice, but things already feel very ominous. So then we go back 3 weeks and we learn how Jack got stationed so close to his brother. Jack is a staff sergeant, and we learn that he's worked his way up through the ranks pretty fast. He definitely needs to get to his brother, I think. We're also introduced to a soldier named Donnie Robinson, who dreams of playing baseball in the major leagues when he returns home in 90 days. So why is Donnie important? Well, if you remember at the end of the last episode, we saw Kevin send an email to a Mr. Robinson, someone that was in one of the pictures that he had from his dad's time in Vietnam. And we saw that man read the email. So Robinson is still alive and has only one leg, and as he guessed it, this is the same Donnie. So how does Donnie lose his leg? Well, some of the soldiers are tossing a football around when Jack tells them to knock it off, and they're of course like, one more toss. A bomb ends up going off and gunfire erupts as they are ambushed, and Donnie ends up stepping on another bomb and having his leg blown off. And as Jack stays by Donnie's side waiting for medevac to arrive, we see something familiar. You know that whole Just Breathe situation we've seen done on the show a few times with Jack and Randall and William?
You could just breathe.
Well, this exists thanks to Donnie. It's something that Donnie's mother used to tell him to do when he was little and scared, to just breathe, because it's what we forget to do when we're scared or we think we're going to die. Now, just before Donnie gets helicoptered out of there, he tells Jack to just breathe. Well, after that ambush, Jack and his soldiers are sent to a nice cush job protecting a ville near Chu Lai for security duty. And thanks to a letter we see Jack holding on to this whole episode, we know that this new post is around maybe 20-25 clicks from where his brother Nicky is stationed. Jack is able to get permission to take 24 hours to go visit his brother. And then we move further back in time, 14 months earlier, to when that letter that Jack was holding onto was delivered to the house. The letter from Nicky states that he got demoted all the way back to private first class because of Article 15. So basically, they think he's a reckless endangerment to himself and his fellow soldiers. So that's definitely a big warning sign here in this letter, but things get more concerning reading on when Nicky says that he knows he's not getting out of there alive, but he's not dying on anyone's time but his own. And we see a glimpse of Nicky's hands drinking a lot and taking pills. After reading this letter, Jack goes to take a look at Nicky's room and we see a Superman figure, and then Jack heads to the doctor for a physical. We learn that Nicky always wanted to be a doctor and that Jack wants to enlist because he just needs to be where Nicky is because Nicky is struggling. Jack doesn't even care if he can't physically get to Nicky, he just needs to be in the same place. But there's a reason Jack isn't already over there in the war. He has tachycardia, in other words, an abnormally rapid heart rate, something he's been hiding, it seems like, from a lot of people. Reluctantly, the doctor does give him advice on how to trick the system and pass the physical to enlist. Now, heading back another year in time, we're now at December 1st, 1969, the day of the Vietnam lottery draft, in which they drew birthdays to see who would be suiting up and heading over to join the war. This is when we finally get to see Nicky's face. Nicky has long hair and glasses, and he is very worried about the lottery. That theme of Superman returns as we find out that basically Jack has been like Nicky's Superman his entire life, but right now Nicky doesn't seem to like it much. He feels more like Lois Lane, who always needs to be saved. That night, Jack and Nicky decide to go watch the draft at a bar, and before they leave, Mom tells Nicky to not worry because he was born lucky, which we'll get to at the end of this episode why she thinks that. But it turns out Nicky isn't so lucky after all, as his birthday's October 18th, and that date gets drawn 5th. Now when they return home, drunk Mr. Pearson tells Nicky to make him proud. Well, Jack has a plan, as always it seems, to protect his brother, and that plan is to take Nicky to Canada to dodge the war. So they head out on a so-called camping trip, and in the car ride, this is when we hear Nicky say those things about moving backwards to figure out how you got here, like where it all started. When they're about 30 minutes from the border, they decide to stop at a hotel and rest for the night, but when Jack wakes up the next morning, Nicky is gone and he's left a note saying thanks for taking care of him, but it's his turn to save the day now. And it's also signed, I love you, Superman, with the initials CK. Which is interesting, right? Because his name's Nicky. What's the CK mean? Well, then we go back another 14 years in time to when Jack accidentally breaks Nicky's glasses and they're afraid their dad's gonna be mad about it, so Jack tries to fix them. Nicky says that he hates wearing the glasses anyway, so he doesn't care. And then Jack tries using this whole Clark Kent Superman analogy in order to make these glasses seem cool. But Nicky's not that dumb, and he's like, Superman doesn't wear the glasses though, only Clark Kent. So Jack's pretty quick to come up with an answer saying, well, Clark Kent is a tough guy in disguise, just like you, Nicky, like he'll have his time to save the day. We then see Nicky try to test that out that night when he hears his parents fighting, removes his glasses, and goes downstairs and actually stands up to his dad. But just as his dad is about to move towards Nicky to punish him, Jack steps in and diffuses the situation. So it feels like even when Nicky tries to do it on his own, Jack always butts in just because Jack feels like he has to protect his brother. Another mention of Jack's heart condition is also brought up here, and their mom says that their dad wasn't always this way, a mean drunk. So cue the time before their dad was a drunk asshole. We go back 7 more years to see a totally different Mr. Pearson. He's actually super nice, holding on to young Jack. He seems to really love his son, and they're waiting at the hospital for Nicky to be born. Now, this nurse keeps harping on how if the baby is born on that day, the 18th, he'll be lucky because 18's are lucky number. On the other hand, Mr. Pearson, he's hoping the baby holds out and is born on the 19th because then that baby would share a birthday with his dad, who we also get to meet, and we see, well, he's a drunk asshole. Grandpa Pearson even at one point offers Mr. Pearson a drink, and we hear Mr. Pearson say he doesn't drink. So what was it that pushed Mr. Pearson over the edge to become a mean-ass drunk just like his father? We actually haven't seen that yet that I know of, but I feel like it may be coming. And if it's not coming, I want it to come because I'm very interested in this. Anyway, Nicky ends up being born at 11:58 p.m. on the 18th, just 2 minutes shy of the 19th. So yes, while everyone's sitting here saying that Nicky was lucky, he was born on the 18th, he's a lucky boy, flash forward that entire time, and everybody's been telling Nicky he's lucky, and it turns out he's not so lucky after all. If he had been born just 2 minutes later, his life would have been completely different. Now, when Mr. Pearson shows Jack his baby brother in the nursery, he tells Jack that his only job and the only thing that matters as a big brother is to look out for his little brother. Well, we have heard that said a lot, and the guilt of Nicky dying is something that Jack has obviously held on to for a very, very long time, his entire life, because Mr. Pearson never really let him live that down, which we saw at the end of the last episode. Well, maybe not the end of the last episode, but we saw it in the last episode when Mr. Pearson basically told Jack that he failed to keep his brother alive. He failed his only job. So then we are back at the scene from the beginning of the episode of Jack reuniting with Nicky, and well, let's just roll the clip. Yeah, that does not seem like the same Nicky, right? A bunch of interviews with Milo and Michael came out on sites like Entertainment Weekly and Deadline after this episode aired, and they both hint that this will be a very dark and sad storyline, and that the Nicky we see at the end of this episode, he's not the same little brother Jack always knew. And that seems pretty evident from that letter that he sent to the family. It seems like Nicky is very much on a dark and destructive path. So what changed in Nicky that made him head down this seemingly suicidal path? You know, seeing Nicky opt to not go to Canada, it feels like maybe he thought this was his time to shine, to make everybody proud, to save the day. And also we saw his dad tell him to make him proud, so maybe he wanted to live up to that and finally be the Superman without having to live in Jack's shadow, or have Jack hold his hand in a sense. So you can bet he's very much probably not happy to see Jack show up to try to be the hero again and save him, even though Jack maybe doesn't have those intentions. He just naturally wants to make sure his brother is okay. I'm very interested to see though how this all plays out, because I think this show has so many different storylines. We saw a little glimpse of like Rebecca as a kid last episode. I feel like there's so much you could go to with her as a kid. There's also those future, flash forwards. It's crazy, and it's just crazy to think how everyone said Nicky was lucky and he wasn't. That's just the thing that really gets you, right? How his life could have been completely different. It's also very interesting to see Grandpa Pearson as a mean alcoholic, and then Mr. Pearson, who we know was not always a mean alcoholic but became one, and then we know Jack also became an alcoholic, or was an alcoholic, but he didn't end up turning out abusive or mean like the previous Pearson men. So why is that? I definitely want to learn more about that. And because the guilt of Nicky's death and all that pressure and guilt that his dad laid on him, it could have easily made Jack turn out that way, I feel. But I do really like kind of how they did this episode. The war stuff was really actually cool looking and very interesting, and the way that they did it backwards, it didn't really make sense at first, but then hearing Nicky say that thing about thinking about where it all started from, it actually made this episode more fun to me, and I'm excited to see just what Kevin learns about Jack's time in Vietnam. If he does talk to Donnie, we know that Donnie left before Jack went and found Nicky. So did Jack talk about Nicky a lot, that Donnie would know that Jack had a brother, or is that something Jack hid? I'm excited to see if Kevin learns as much as we learned in this episode. I'll also admit it was kind of nice to take a step back away from everybody else on the show's drama and just focus kind of on one character. Sometimes I feel like there's too many storylines, so these little one-off episodes, every now and then, they're kind of nice. And while next week we're gonna get a lot more of Toby and his life. So let's take a look at the promo.
I'm running for councilman for the 12th district. 33% of your businesses have been boarded up. Go home.
Yeah! Toby, oh, sweetie, your fingernails. Just bitten them right down to the nubs.
I went off my meds, and I need to go back on them, like, right away.
What's going on?
Well, it seems like Randall definitely has a lot of Jack in him. That whole Superman, I have to save everybody mentality, yeah, definitely something that Jack passed on to Randall. We can see that with Randall's crusade to fix up William's old neighborhood and run for councilman. And like I said, I'm excited to learn more about Toby. We get to see little Toby, and we get to see his mental health issues kind of addressed, and I love Wendy Malick as well, who plays his mom, so I'm excited that she'll be back. But that pretty much wraps up this week's recap of This Is Us. So what did you think about this Jack and Nicky-centric episode, Vietnam? What do you think about their relationship, and how do you think that progresses forward from where we left off in this episode? What do you think it is that, kind of broke Nicky? How do you think he ended up dying? And what do you want to see moving forward this season? Is there any other character you would like to kind of dive more into their life, maybe their past that we haven't seen yet? Let me know down in the comments all your thoughts, your theories, anything you feel like talking about. And after that, you can click right over here for even more of my videos and interviews. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because I'm always here talking about, shows that hopefully you like, that I like, and other news and stuff. I'm Lisa. Thanks for hanging out with me. See you again next time.